2 has entered the podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Backlog with Player 2. We are coming up on the final episode of the first game in the Backlog, Beyond Good and Evil. I have finished the game in the last 2 weeks, and I'm ready to speak on it. Before we get into that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping and make sure I level set expectations for what we can expect on the podcast moving forward. I mentioned this last week with gaming news a little bit, but essentially, we're going to be releasing an episode every single week. 1 week will be gaming news, and then the alternate week will be the Backlog. And then gaming news, and then the Backlog. During the Backlog alternate week, that's when you can expect episodes of Gamer Friends, which are more focused. And again, links to this show and to Gamer Friends will be in the link tree in the show notes. So no worries there. We've also started in the Gamer Friends Discord a Backlog channel. So if you prefer Discord to emailing or reaching out via social media, which, honestly, the back and forth in the channel would probably be the easiest thing to do anyways, feel free to join up with the Gamer Friends Discord. Again, link in the show notes under the link tree. And once you're in there, you can join the conversation on the current game, pitch future games, and you're even open to start your own kind of side backlog group that you can go back and forth with on games in your own personal backlog if they're not currently the main game being played. As of this recording, the next backlog game I plan to do is Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, and that's on the Nintendo 64. It's breaking my soft rule about accessibility, so I apologize. It's just, longtime listeners of the show know that I've been trying to beat this game for decades. I either have the game and the thing, but it's not at my house, or they don't have a memory card, or whatever. And it's been a long time since I've seen a reasonably priced Nintendo 64 that I could get my hands on. But thanks to Full Metal Merc, that dream has become a reality. So, little reminder during our housekeeping segment, guys, if you haven't checked out his store, links in the show notes, you should, because not only will you find great deals on used games and game accessories and toys, but if you reach out to him directly, he's out here every day in the streets hunting, wheeling and dealing. He has relationships with vendors that he's developed over several years. He has connections in this town. So he's a good person to have in your corner if you're looking for something in particular. And again, he got me a Nintendo 64 at a very reasonable price. Probably 100 or 200% less than what I've seen it in other places. So, all right. Before we get into discussing the final part of Beyond Good and Evil, obviously, spoilers. I'll explain where we're at, and then I'll just launch right into where we're going. So if you haven't played it, maybe skip to after the ad so we can discuss the next game further. Otherwise, here we go. Let's go ahead and discuss the final part of Beyond Good and Evil, and stick around to the end, and we'll talk about Mystical Ninja and kind of where we're going to go with that. So I believe last week when Full Metal Merc joined me, we went up through to where he stopped, and essentially we were investigating an abandoned slaughterhouse where kidnapped victims of the Doms were being held. And this is where we learned that the Alpha sections, the group supposedly fighting the Doms on the people of Hillis's behalf, are actually being possessed and manipulated by the Doms. Using Beluga, which is a ship that our good old Uncle Pig Page used back in the day. I had to find a lot of pearls for this. We were able to then travel to the Dom's lunar base. So we literally go to the moon. And it's kind of a cool part in the game. I basically jumped in after the slaughterhouse, realizing that I had to grab, I think it was about 50 pearls. And usually only find them one, maybe two at a time. But at that point in the story, when I went to go see everybody else in the Iris network, they just threw pearls at me. So it wasn't long after a little bit of exploration and looking around town, I was able to get all the pearls I needed, and I was able to get a missing part for the ship and an accessory, an add-on essentially, that allowed me to travel into space. which is kind of a cool part. You get to do a little space battle. Love space battles, especially unexpected space battles. Good times there. So you may be wondering why we're going to the Dom's lunar base other than the investigation. Well, there is an inciting incident where the lighthouse where Jade was taking care of all of the orphans was attacked, and the orphans were kidnapped. So she is probably at her lowest of lows, but she quickly finds her resolve. We get the pearls, we travel to space. We're there to save the kids, hopefully save Paige as well. We travel through the lunar base, and luckily it's not a ton of stealth like it has been in the previous games. There's a little bit of exploration and navigation, but for the most part, other than maybe, like I said, a couple of sections, there's not a heavy emphasis on stealth, which I appreciated. It wasn't near as hard as like doing the stealth in some of the previous set pieces. That said, eventually we find our way to Paige, who is being held in like this enclosure, and we get him out, and we find out that he's dead. Unfortunately, he's been tortured for weeks, and just his body gave out. Jade holds his hand and then moves on to continue to investigate. But when she comes back and they're getting ready to leave, she runs into Paige. Turns out that Jade was actually, I guess, related to the Doms. Like, they put a Doms in human form to travel down to Hillis to help infiltrate it. It's kind of weird how they explained it. But essentially, she has the power to, just like the Doms, extract life force, but also has the power to give life force. And when she embraced Paige for the last time, transferred life into him and revived him. And it was actually a really touching moment. I was happy about it. I was like, oh no, not my Uncle Paige. It was drama. After rescuing Paige, they destroy the command ship from the main antagonist, and they transmit the report and all the evidence gathered throughout the lunar base. And it sparks a revolution against the Alpha sections. And then we go after the Dom's High Priest. This is basically the entity that's orchestrating the kidnap and the extraction of life force from people in Hillis. Apparently, if they don't do this, they will starve to death. Like this, they're basically a soul vampire. During the confrontation with the High Priest, Paige and Double H are captured again, and Jade is forced to submit to him. But she's able to kind of reach inside herself and use that special power to fight him. And this final boss fight was so frustrating. Like, oh my god. The issue was they took away all my healing items, and then I got killed in the first attempt because I didn't move fast enough to react to some of the attacks from the boss. But when I was revived, I was only revived with 4 hearts. But since I couldn't replenish my health because all my items were taken away, I essentially could be killed in 2 hits. I kind of needed to finish this entire multi-phase boss fight without getting hit. Now, they do checkpoint somewhere in the middle, luckily, but it's still a lot. So he makes clones of Double H that can hit. As soon as they hit me, they take away 2 hearts. So 2 hits from them and I'm gone. And I have to fend them off, and he holds up a shield, which is really annoying, so I have to like time their attacks, swoop in, hit them, and then they turn into Dom's monsters, kill those, and then when there's like 2 or 3 of them left, the High Priest starts shooting beams at me. So I'm dodging the beams, dodging the attacks, hitting the guys, then hitting the things they turn into, and I have to destroy like, I don't know, like 6 or 8 Double H clones. So I get through that, and then the part of the High Priest's face, this is like a big monster, it like warps in to attack you, and you have a split second to attack. So you actually have to memorize where it's going to show up as you land attacks, and you cannot combo, because if you get locked into a combo, you're attacking in the wrong direction. It hits you, and once you get knocked down, it stun locks you and just hits you as soon as you get back up, and it's over, you're dead. It was very, very frustrating. Ben was with me, actually, and he was watching me play, and I must have attempted this boss like 15, 20, 30 times. I don't know how many times. I spent like a good hour. It was very frustrating. I finally was able to figure out where it was going to appear, when to hit it, when to dodge, through just numerous times banging my head against the wall. And that kind of soured the ending a bit for me. But Overall, I really enjoyed the experience. She revives everybody in the base. Post-credits, they're back on Hillis. And then you see a brief scene where like a Dom's spore grows on Paige's hand. So I'm guessing that's what they were going to tease for the sequel that's never coming. At least not anytime soon, it doesn't feel like. So, I don't know. I really enjoyed the aspect of this kind of small and focused story just because of the size of the world. But then, the threat as it escalates, you're investing in what's going on. I think that if this game were to be remade in the modern age, it would actually be a fun story to tell. And I think that there's enough ideas here that if they were fleshed out or given more time to breathe, it would make for a fantastic game. What really drags it down for me is the controls, especially fighting. It's very hard to get Jade to attack in the direction that you want her to attack. Enemies often will fly out of reach. They'll zoom in quickly. They will hit Jade or her partner, stun lock them, and kill them pretty easily. And there's just an overall kind of jankiness to the combat, and there's a focus on combat. Also, the stealth, the sections were too long, and the checkpoints were too far apart, and the windows for like sliding in and not being seen by enemies were sometimes just razor thin. So, I mean, you have to forgive the game a lot, but if you do and you get through it, it's fun to experience. Now, I just spoiled the shit out of it, so if you're listening to this after not playing it, then not a whole lot of reason to go back to it. All right, we're going to take a quick break for an ad, then I'll be back to close it out and give a little bit more info on the next game in the backlog, so I hope you'll stick around for that. It is ad time, so let me explain to you. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place.
Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And when you're hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so much more.
It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, and best of all, Anchor is totally free.
So I need y'all to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And we're back. All right, so next episode's game. We are going to be playing Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. So you can expect an episode to drop on the first half of Mystical Ninja starring Goemon on September 30th. So mark your calendars. That is 2 Fridays from now. We will basically be playing the game up through the Peach Mountain Shoguns Festival Temple Castle. So once you reach that castle, that's where I'm stopping. And then we'll actually finish the game in the second part. So for these next 2 weeks, you got about 5 hours of gameplay or so. If you stay and play, probably a few more hours. But that's essentially, if you're just kind of zipping through, how long it was going to take the average person to get through to that section of the game. And you got 2 weeks to do it. So I hope you guys will join me for that game if you have access to it. If you don't, I completely understand. I promise we're going to try to do more accessible games. I just have a few I want to get to that are not as accessible, and I apologize. All right, for those who are interested, gaming news, of course, is next week. My co-host, or player 2, if you will be Draven. He's a great guy, and I think he's going to bring a really cool energy to the podcast. So look forward to that. Don't forget, we're uploading new episodes to our hub at anchor.fm/player2 as enter the pod every single Friday. You either get gaming news or you get in the backlog. You can listen to us pretty much wherever podcasts are played. Please be sure to check the show notes for our updated link tree so you can catch the gamer friends on alternating weeks. And join the Discord so you can hop in and talk with all of us. We'd love to have you. If you want to support the show, you can do that monetarily by going to patreon.com/player2 as enter the pod. Shout out to our current patron, Jordan. We appreciate you. And if you want to contact us directly without joining any of the social media or Discord, you can always email us at mcpaperstacks@gmail.com. I'm open to listener questions, guest suggestions, feedback, backlog discussion, any of that. Looking forward to talking with you guys. All right, well, that, I believe, is an episode of The Backlog. So, thank you for those who came out to listen. We love you, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care.